in his honor. He is also our gracious and enthusiastic and kind host here at the church.
Thank you. One of the problems with ministers and rabbis is we like to talk too much. Stop that. I wanted to say something that's very important, though. A lot of people ask the question, how could humankind permit this nightmare to happen? And I didn't know the man personally, but I know a minister who was a little boy, he's my age, and he lived in the Dakotas. And he would listen to the news on the radio with his father. And he would ask his father, how can this be happening in Germany? And his father said something that I, as a pastor, I've never forgot. He said, the church, and I'm ashamed, that the church did this. The church adopted the language of the state for their existence. And we're doing that today. Jews are doing that. Christians are doing it. And we have to stop that. We have to stop that. And that's my sermon. But it's a good one. Ralph Young here is a very humble man. He doesn't want to talk a lot, but he'll say a few words, I'm sure. Let me just say this. He was with the liberating forces and the first people in the Dachau. There is a marvelous disc that we have for those of you who would like to get one of those discs that of a talk that you gave at Rotary about 10 years ago, wasn't it? Something like that. Absolutely spectacular. We don't want to give it away because May videographers did it, and we obviously, so we'd have to burn it and charge you $5 or whatever. That's a good basis. Obviously, what Ralph saw cannot compare to the horror that the Jewish people suffered. Nonetheless, this has burned a hole in his heart and changed him forever. And his lovely wife here, we need to say hi to Ruth. They have only been married 76 years. I am sitting down, and I want to thank you on behalf of the People United. We were so happy that this temple is here. It is a joy to us. It is a blessing for us. And so welcome. Now, Ralph, I'm sure that a couple people are going to have some questions for you. Please answer any questions they have. I know it's past your bedtime. There are treats downstairs. So, seriously, I'm sure that the best way is to ask questions, and then we'll go downstairs. And if you'd like to say a few words, but I'm sure there are some questions. Okay, Ralph?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Ralph you need to talk up.
Let me say a few words first. Having gone in to Dachau, if you want to hear a little bit of my story, what I saw, I'll be glad to tell you. I can do that. I'll answer your questions first or last, whichever you choose. If you have a question you'd like to hear right now that I might be able to answer, far away.
Tell your story first, I think.
Okay, story first. Okay, story first. Here we go. Some of you have heard this because, as David mentioned, I made a talk to the Kiwanis Club and several other smaller organizations and some schools and to a group of churches down in southern Indiana. And people seem to enjoy it. I was, to kind of set this off, I went to service because I wanted to go to service. That tells you something right there. Man, was I surprised. But anyhow, I was very simply what they call a forward observer for field artillery. I was not in the infantry. I didn't carry a gun and run and shoot. We were seeking and destroying. At the end, as the service wound down, the fighting wound down and everything, our group ran out of anything to do because the Germans took off. And they left miserable thing. And so I and a few more guys was asked to volunteer to go and help out in a prison camp. Now you can imagine 8 or 10 guys, how many different opinions popped up that we were going to face. We had never seen only the ashes of us camp. So we go to the Dachau. Dachau prison camp, if you can visualize just a great big square 100-acre field, trees and so forth on. And across one end is the entrance to this big fancy thing. Some of you may have been there as a tourist, but it did. Railroad came not far from there, and there was a spur that run up to the main gate where they brought in their freight and so-called food and stuff. When it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon when our vehicle took us up, and it came to a screeching halt, and the driver said, "Holy cow, guys, don't look over there." Well, we looked over there. Here's what we saw. About 50 or 75 freight cars, box cars and flat cars on the railroad, parked on this spur that went into town. On these cars were hundreds of people, women, men, youngsters, who had been slashed, shot, beaten, arms cut off, legs cut off, on these cars, right cars. We didn't say anything to each other until after supper. But anyhow, that was the entrance to this. Our job as we entered the camp, our job was to specifically look after the inmates. Now, the guards and the people who had manned this camp took off before the Americans got there and left, and just left these people there. Now, all they could do is lay there. We saw big 6-foot guys weigh 40 pounds, maybe, eating straw, believe it or not, that they laid on. Bunch of anything. Their beds were just a flat shelf, board shelf, built up here. And supposed to be canvas hanging over the front. It wasn't anything but tattered old rags and stuff. And if you think, I think it's almost impossible to imagine what these guys thought when they saw us. I mean, they came to life like a cricket. I mean, they jumped out of these bunks and cried and prayed and grabbed you and squeezed you. You couldn't hardly breathe. And this was, I mean, they were so elated and shouting, at last, freedom at last. Yeah, but in this camp, the layout in this camp was, as you went in the main entrance, up on the left were maintenance garages where they repaired the vehicles, and scooters and things. Then you went down the way, and this is where people, when they came into the camp, this is where they were bunked, placed bunked, wide open there. Then the next section, as I remember, was these people moved up a notch when others came in behind. And guess how they got that notch? Then the next one where the people were so misled. Some guard would come and say, "Hey, get in the shower today. I'm gonna give you all a nice shower." Hadn't had a shower for months. They will give you a shower. So maybe 25, 50 people moved into a big room, and in this room, the ceiling had jets coming down. And they actually thought they were getting a shower, but deadly gas come out of those jets. And of course, that ended it, fell over. And then the next big compartment was a furnace. And that was the next one as they went around. And many of them had been. Just briefly on that, we interviewed several civilians, because this was in a kind of a residential section, as I remember, of town. So we talked and interviewed several civilians who swore on bended knee that they didn't know that place was there, but you could smell it for miles. Big black smoke rolling out from this. Anyhow, that was our job, as we got to work on our job, was to keep these people, number one, from eating. Now the American military had scads of food, and they knew it. And to sit there and eat a K ration, which was pure heaven to them if they saw you doing it, and not give them a bite. Because a few of them, guys thought, well, it won't hurt him, I'll give him a bite of this cheese or candy bar or something, you know. No digestive system. This was our job, taking care of these inmates, and it was, I was so appreciative to be, just to be able to help those poor people, and that was left. And it was, like say, it made you cry. Anyhow, that's pretty much of what I saw at Dog Out, and continued on and all of this. And I saw an incident, the guards that were there who run away for some unknown reason came back, and some of the inmates happened to be there, and they caught him. Now there was probably a dozen, maybe 10. To get to him, they actually, with their hands, we watched, tore a hole in a chain link fence.
Whoa.
And got through. That's how really uptight they were. And of course they gave him the same treatment he'd given some of them. But it was such a pleasure. I mean, see adults come up and start crying, you know, they couldn't talk. So appreciative of all the things. That little thing that I was involved in was no great deal. It was just something we were doing, our job, but it didn't. Then I just give a little short spiel on that, and now I'll take a question or two if you want to. Maybe